We don't need a CBA to enjoy great baseball talk. There's plenty of Blue Jays talk for all to enjoy, so just sit back. Take in the views from the On Fek Circle, presented by JFtC.com. This misadventure streams live Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and is a proud part of the Jays from the Couch YouTube channel family of shows. On Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you should put your Blue Jays colored glasses on to watch Sunny Side of the Dome, hosted by my colleague Karen Suter. No one talks Blue Jays baseball with the knowledge and heart that Karen does. And unlike yours truly, Karen is so likable, you can't resist listening to all she has to share. And both YouTube shows would not be possible without the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, 289 episodes strong. That's hosted by senior editor and our founder, Sean Doyle. That comes to you live Mondays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and is available for live streaming on our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and our Twitter handle at Jays from Couch. My show and Karen's show also you can pick up live on all of those said outlets. Plus, you can download all 289 episodes anywhere where you find the finer podcasts. I am the madman, and let's put emphasis on madman across the border, the feckless wonder Steve Fek. We thought we were going to have a deal. I was actually hopeful that we were going to be able to have a little roundtable, have Sean Doyle, Karen Suter, and myself talk to you about, the ins and outs of the CBA that apparently is not going to happen now. The owners made a quote-unquote final proposal about 3:30, 3:45 this afternoon. Players did not waste much time in rejecting it. Rob Manfred gave his usual stiff address to the press. In fairness to him, he was not really angry. He was not really, you could tell he was frustrated, but he tried to put as much positive spin on it. But then as the reporters started asking questions, you could tell that he was about to lose his mind. So there will not be baseball. Certainly no spring training anytime soon. Manfred announced the first two series of the 2022 season have already been canceled. And according to Manfred, those games are not going to be made up, so players are going to potentially miss out on some paychecks. But it's unfortunate that it's gotten to this. And my original intention for this show was not to talk about the CBA. Unless we were doing a celebratory thing. Hey, it's finally here. Last night, I was certainly on with various platforms and other shows and Blue Jays fans until about 3 a.m. As they kept negotiating. It really started to look promising. But alas, here we are. And who thought it would take the feckless wonder to be the person to try to bring some sort of sense and some kind of calm approach to some rather bad news here. It shocks me, and I'm sure it shocks many of you that have watched before. As we're talking today, please do post up your questions if you're on YouTube channel, Facebook, on Twitter. We've got folks behind the scenes that'll put those questions out there, and I will answer them the best I can. I certainly will answer them honestly, or at least tell you the truth as I perceive it to be. And I'm not saying that I know everything or that everything I say should be taken as gospel truth, but I want this to be a conversation. And when we're talking about a topic like the CBA, it isn't always easy to do with getting somebody's feathers ruffled or all riled up, or making it seem that you're preaching. As a ordained clergy person, I know, hard to believe, but it's true. It could be easy for me to preach, and I think I sometimes slip into that, and I'll fess up to that. Lionheart, sorry you're late. It does suck for MLB fans today, Lionheart. You're never late. And quite often, you're probably better off coming in late, at least for this show. Not for the podcast or for Karen's show, but you never know what kind of goopy stuff I'm going to say. But it's great to see you. We really do appreciate your input on all of our shows. Karen's Sunny Side of the Dome, on the Jason from the Couch podcast, and certainly here. If anything that I say strikes you one way or the other, don't be shy. Don't be shy. I should have actually, I'm glad, I was going to play an Elvis Presley song actually to lead into this podcast. I went with Trio instead, but I'll see what I can work in future episodes for you there, Lionheart. Anyway, the final proposal didn't have a whole lot of surprises. The owners went with the pre-arbitration pool, bumped it up to about $30 million. The minimum salary went up about just under 20%. It went to $700,000 for the first year with $10,000 increases each of the next 5 years. That's below where the players wanted it. The players are saying it should be $805,000 to start, with higher incremental increases going forward that way. 5 teams in the draft lottery. And that's going to be a whole other show. I don't want to get bogged down into the whole draft lottery thing, but that's something that the players felt was important. The owners went there. The owners said, okay, fine, we'll do a draft lottery. And with 5 teams, I believe that incorporates the most teams as far as a flat kind of a deal. I don't know if they're going to go into the NHL, convoluted, well, if this happens or that happens. And with the NBA draft lottery, they're trading picks into 2027 already. So it's really hard to say their draft lottery and how that works, but certainly a pretty significant draft lottery status. They proposed implementing an international draft, and that has implications too. That's probably going to be my next show. Let's talk about an international draft if it actually happens and how it impacts the Blue Jays. But there's a wide disparity, not just in spending, but in actual expertise of signing international free agents. If you have an international draft, just like you do with your amateur draft, now you're talking all teams would have not all teams would have first shot, wouldn't be spending. The worst team, or if they do the lottery for the international draft, would have the best shot at getting and drafting and trying to sign the best young amateur talent in the Dominican Republic and South America and in Europe. It won't happen in Asia because the KBO, which is the Korean Baseball Association, and Nippon Professional Baseball in Japan, they have their own negotiated agreements with how players could go over. And unless a player coming out of high school or coming out of amateur programs in Japan, unless everybody passed on trying to sign them, Major League Baseball can't sign a 17 or an 18-year-old amateur talent. It has, the first right goes to teams in the Central and Pacific League. So international draft, that was something that I know the players were really hesitant to give up on, but the owners proposed it in a way where it ties into the players' stated notion and belief that they want the competitive balance situation to be rectified. That they're tired of seeing the same teams just never getting any better and making excuses for why they're not getting any better. But in essence, they're saying there is a competitive balance disparity. The international draft would also address that. So the owners were, making deals. Probably the biggest things that everybody was talking about was the 12-team playoff. Owners originally wanted 14 teams, and they wanted 14 teams because they would get $100 million in additional revenues. If there was a 14-team playoff, they're going to have to scrape and get by with just $85 million if they go and have a 12-team playoff. But the top 2 teams in each league would get a bye. The other 4 seeds in each league would play against each other for the right to then have a series against the top seeds. I'm not a big expanded playoff guy. And I realize I am in I don't even want to call it the minority. I'm like that guy that runs for office for some, green chair party or, free pizza party. Somebody that somehow gets on the ballot, but it's really not going to get any votes. I understand that the people want to see expanded playoffs. What I didn't see is the players had proposed 12-team playoff, but going back to 2 divisions. Get rid of the 3-division deal. Those details didn't come out. I can't imagine the owners would go for that, at least not in year 1 of the CBA. But the differential in money, that makes a difference. There's also, I want to say they committed an extra, well, at least Manfred claims they committed an extra $200+ million to amateur development and programs, not necessarily all to one area, but kind of spread out over a bunch of different initiatives and scouting to help, again, make up for those teams that just can't seem to get it right. They can't get out of their own way. They felt that was something that was playing to the players' desires to see competitive balance. But in the end, it came down to 2 areas where, if you think about it, this pre-arbitration pool money and the players, it's going to affect an additional 10 to 12, maybe 15 players a year. So all this screaming and thinking about pre-arbitration pool money and the disparity between what the players were asking for and what the owners were offering, the owners did bump up from 25 to 30. It's only affecting, let's say, 20 players. It's going to affect 20 players. And the competitive balance tax threshold, which really is only going to impact, at the most, 8 teams. I mean, there'll be years that a team, let's say, well, we'll call it the Blue Jays, because the Blue Jays, I don't think, have ever been in that situation. We all believe that there's a window for the Blue Jays to go to and win multiple World Series. So there'll be a year, 2-year, 3-year stretch where the Jays will suddenly be one of those teams that will be facing penalties for spending above whatever the established competitive balance tax is. The players are up into the $230 million. That's just not going to happen. The owners did bump it up to $220 million, but it's $220 million for 3 years, and then $234 million. I'm sorry, 230, 234, then $240 million. Again, is it everything the players wanted? No, but I think that's as far as the owners felt comfortable. And I don't want to use the term small market. That's, yes, smaller revenue streams. Yes, lower population base to draw fans into the stadium. It doesn't make them a small market, because a team is going to be valued at close to $1 billion if you sell it now. That's what they're talking. I mean, they're talking, if they do expand, and we'll talk about expansion in a little bit and how this is playing a role, that they may be asking $2 billion to buy in to finish last for 4 or 5 years. So, there really are no small market teams. There are markets and there are owners that hide behind that limited revenue stream and say, "Oh, we can't compete, so we want to have a shot at some players, so we have to punish the teams that are going to be willing to go spending like crazy people, like Steve Cohen and the Mets, the Yankees and Red Sox, Dodgers are always above that threshold, But it's not the entire league that's going to be there. It's a limited amount of teams. So it's not a salary cap. No matter how the players want to spin that as it's a salary cap, it's not. It is a way for Major League owners and MLB as an entity to take that money and then assign it to the teams that are receiving revenue sharing dollars, and where theoretically those teams are then going to put that money into their system. Now, the Rays spend a lot of money on their farm system and on their scouting and international scouting. There are teams like the Orioles and the Pirates that are getting better now that they have new general managers and new presidents of baseball operation. But traditionally, they were just pocketing that money. And that's what the players are saying. Well, this revenue sharing, these teams are just pocketing the money and they're not spending it in infrastructure or whatever it would be. And that's not totally true, but nothing in a labor agreement is ever totally true. No matter what side you're on, they're not giving you the whole story. The reason that this agreement did not get done, didn't get done in December, didn't get done at any time during negotiations, it's fairly simple. The players are all chips in. We want to win the deal. They got their butts kicked, especially in the last CBA. And the executive director for that, Tony Clark. Just saying. But even in 2011, under Michael Weiner, I don't think it really came in. I think the crack started to show at the end of the 2011 CBA. And then the players realized, oh my God, we're really in a tough situation. And somehow they got outmaneuvered and didn't really improve the lot of the membership as a whole. The top end players are still getting their money. And they always will. You can debate whether they should or shouldn't, but they're getting their money. Okay, so the players are absolutely, and there's a finger to be pointed here, not at Tony Clark. You don't get to that kind of a position, whether you're Rob Manfred as a commissioner or as a lead negotiator for the owners, or you're Tony Clark and you're the executive director of the Players Association. You don't get that thing without having a little bit of chutzpah and a little bit of bravado. So he realizes that his job's online. He has to satisfy the players as a whole. This is being driven to a great extent, and to their credit, sort of, by the big contract guys. Max Scherzer, you have Francisco Lindor. You have these big salaried guys that are trying to get the best, really pushing for, we're not backing down. It's easy for them. Okay, they're not a fringe veteran player that needs spring training to win themselves a job so they can keep playing in the majors and going from there. They're not a young guy that might be on the 40-man roster that needed to have a good spring training to break camp and start their clock on time. But Scott Boras, the super agent, I have a couple other words that I would put behind super to describe Scott Boras. And he's only one S short at the end of his name for one of the words I would like to use. But this is a family program. I guarantee you, in the annals of labor negotiating history, never has a private agent, not just a sports agent or entertainment agent, an agent of any type being a critical part of a negotiating team for a union. When I was in radio and, I was a member, of the union, I didn't really have an agent because I wasn't that talented or didn't make that much money. But, if I had an agent, I couldn't say, oh, here's my agent, Joe Schmo. He's going to sit down with us and he's going to negotiate what's better for a radio personality like myself. Forget about the engineers and the news people or whatever it is. I'm an on-air personality, so he's going to negotiate a special set of deals for me and my fellow on-air personalities. That doesn't happen. Since baseball's America's pastime, I want to see Scott Boras be brought up on charges of treason because he's basically damaging America and apple pie. I realize that's not realistic and that's a little dramatic, but I'm trying to make a point. Okay, Scott Boras is a pest. He's a carrier. Malaria, the disease, kills the patient. But it's that mosquito that carries the malaria around and then comes to suck some blood out, that 20% or whatever it is agents get these days, sucks that blood out, delivers the deadly malaria into the patient, but then goes off and is all happy because, look, I got my blood and I did my job. I'm the circle of life and all that. Meanwhile, the patient is now critically and fatally ill. I don't want to spend too much time on Scott Boras, but these are the things that are happening. And this, again, I'm not asking you to go lockstep with everything that I'm saying here. I'm not even thinking that many of you agree with me. I'm not thinking that I can change any of your minds, but I like to throw things out there so you can think about things outside the box, as they say. People always say, well, Fek, he always thinks outside the box. I don't know. I don't really understand what that means. I don't think outside the box. I actually venture outside of the box, and I look around and I report on things that I'm seeing going on. Doesn't mean I like those things or that I believe in those things, but I'm actually not just sitting in the box and relying on reports to see. I venture outside that box and then come back and relay stories and everything with you so that you can make up your own minds. You don't have to agree with me, but hopefully that you will listen and you'll share this with your friends and you guys can have real conversations about what this is. There's something that players are doing that makes no sense, but they're doing this at the urgence of some of their labor professionals they hire down as consultants, and certainly Scott Boras. They're negotiating and setting their levels based on revenue streams that haven't even been finalized yet. Now, the owners are going to start making big money from gambling companies. In fact, a lot of casinos have already bought up a bunch of regional sports networks, and they're going to make money, increasing amounts of money from streaming. The problem is, right now, none of those deals are even beyond the initial negotiating standpoint of it. So it's not like Prime Video and Apple TV and Peacock have just already deposited money in MLB's coffers. Eventually, that money's going to start coming in. And gambling, it's only going to get larger. But there's no flat line that you can compare it against. So players can't say, there's no reason why the CBT threshold can be higher or that you can't raise the minimum salary to $800,000 or $900,000 or you can't do this or you can't spend money on this because you're going to have all this money coming in. But Major League Baseball, in their defense, and it's hard to defend them, but in their defense, They don't know exactly, they can't put a dollar figure on what those revenue streams are going to be. So how can they commit to giving away money? Now, admittedly, a lot of the things they're saying, oh, we've increased by more than $100 million between pensions and benefits and all these other things. It's $100 million higher than any CBA, or certainly the last two CBAs have ever gone up. The thing is, that $100 million in reality is the extra money they're going to get from expanded playoffs. So they can put that kind of money into a deal like with the international draft and the amateur programs or pre-draft. Well, they can put that kind of money in there, increases to benefits and pensions, because they know that money's coming in. They don't know what the streaming revenues are. And the players are taking it, oh, no, we have to consider this. This is part of it. This is why I get so angry at the players. They're foolhardy to think they can get all of the benefits back in one CBA negotiation. Okay, your feelings are hurt. You got some wounded pride. Suck it up. You're professionals. Okay, stop whining. If I want wine, I'll go to Napa Valley. I don't need wine. I need you to get a deal done so I can watch baseball and all of you can watch baseball. And in all honesty, last night, multiple reports came out that the owners said, look, if we can't get your ultimate final CBT threshold number with some adjustments down to where we've already gone, tonight we need it on Monday. We can't improve or give any kind of final deal until we know what the CBT is. The players didn't do that. The players said, nope, this is it. $300 million minimum, that's $300 million, I'm sorry, $230 million minimum, and ridiculous increases going on upwards. If you're not going to, the one thing the owners absolutely had to have was a number that could still be negotiated, but a number that the players could say, this is my drop dead number. And they didn't provide that. So both sides are guilty. And I want to just do sort of like a little mini history review of CBA negotiations. So I don't want to dwell on it too long, but it gives you an idea of how these things are so cyclical and why sometimes the players come out ahead, most times the owners come out ahead. Now, going back to the beginning of the Players Association, back in 1968, the first collectively bargained contract in sports history. Marvin Miller, who is, if there's a Mount Rushmore for labor experts and lawyers and negotiators, he's the primary head up there. He left the steelworkers, and he came into a system where literally the owners, and they had done for almost a century, were getting they just were, I refuse to use the word slavery. I know Curt Flood did. Made for good headlines to try to make a point for what he was trying to do as far as breaking the reserve clause. But servitude, certainly. So when he came on and the union started negotiating, he got an increase of the minimum salary from $6,000 to $10,000. 2 years later, widespread, significant increases as far as benefits and pension programs. That's where the Players Association was back when all of this started. And Marvin Miller, he was tough. He was tough. And the owners were scared of him. They were frightened. They used to go around the training camps before, negotiations happened and said, oh, Marvin Miller, you don't want to name him as your game day. You're going to have all kinds of problems. They were scared to death of him. His reputation preceded him. There were strikes in 1972, 1980, and 1981. And there were lockouts in 1973 and 1976. And technically, there was I don't want to call it a strike, but there was a labor slowdown in spring training of 69. The right to arbitration, the establishment of free agency, unbelievable advances as far as benefits and pension plans and conditions the players played under, Marvin Miller made it all happen. When he retired, he said, look, when he turned 66, I'm going to retire. I'm going to follow the mandatory federal retirement age of 65. A man by the name of Ken Fowlett came on board. He lasted, maybe a year and a half. Why? Because he had the audacity, after having several players, including Keith Hernandez, being the primary and the first one, come to him and say, look, there's a major drug problem in here. I tell you, I'm doing it myself, but I just got traded because I wouldn't come forward to Whitey Herzog in a team clubhouse meeting admitting that I have a drug problem. So he actually negotiated with the owners the first drug policy. Players got pissed. They rejected it, fired him. So the owners thought, well, good. The players are a little weak now, so we can go and do collusion and we can try to get cute. Eventually, Donald Fair was there. So now, even though the owners made big gains with the collusion, and there was, the lockout in 1990, Donald Fair was tough. He was virulently anti-drug policy. He was tough. He made that strike, as damaging as it was to many players and to the game itself in 94 and 95. He made that a win ultimately for the players. The owners were so arrogant. They're like, you know what? Take it or leave it. There's a salary cap. You don't want to do it? We'll get replacement players, too bad. Unfair labor practice filed against the owners. Arbitrator ordered camps open. It took another year and a half to get a final CBA. But Donald Fair made that happen. More explosion in player salaries, benefits. But he also had, at least in the beginning, rather shady commissioners. Fay Vincent, Peter Ueberroth. Marvin Miller had Bowie Kuhn, who basically was, you could see the marionette strings on his arms and legs. But then Bud Selig came on the board, and that started to go again back toward the owners. And that led to the problems in the rather, and players have not been shy saying we lost the last two CBAs and we're angry about it. That led to that feeling because Selig, using Rob Manfred at one, as the chief negotiator, basically had the 2011-2016 CBA. I mean, Manfred was commissioner then, but it was definitely back in the owner's favor. That's why the players are like, we have to win this. There has to be some middle ground. And the middle ground is it. The blueprint's already made out. No one wants to pick it up off the drawing board, and nobody wants to make that first deposit on contractors to build that CBA. So it's frustrating for all of us, but there's so much history behind it, and there's so many little things that probably either don't get published or don't get reported or they get lost, in the mix. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. And I did run over. I do apologize if you made dinner reservations in time right after my show ending. As always, it's great when you check in. I hope you do respond. You can get me on Twitter at FecklessWonder. You can reply in the comment sections in Facebook and on YouTube. Please do so. I want this to be a conversation. There's going to be baseball at some point in 2022. We know it's not going to happen the first week of April, the first two series, but it'll get there. We'll be back, barring another CBA bombshell, in 2 weeks. Karen's show, Sunny Side of the Dome, is up on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube channel. You can also follow it on Facebook and Twitter. the Jason from the Couch radio podcast. Karen Suter and I joined Sean Doyle. Sean is very gracious to allow us to do that. It is so much fun. It is possible to have good baseball conversation even during a lockout. So make sure you tune into all of the shows. Go to jasonthecouch.com for terrific analysis, terrific theoretical things. Lionheart, thank you very much for watching as always. You have a good evening yourself. Hope we'll see you on the podcast with some comments. I'm the Feckless Wonder, Steve Fek. Keep heart. Have a lion heart. It'll be okay. We just have to be a little bit more patient. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks, and I'll see you on the podcast next Monday.